It's our pleasure to welcome you to this session in which we will will be hosting distinguished group of panelists to talk about an increasingly important theme, and that is the sovereign wealth funds. They can be called the stability funds or the future generations funds. This the name has been evolving with the evolvement of the uses. I remember the Kuwaiti uh, fund, which was started in 1953, was the beginning for these sovereign funds to start appearing, and the name also indicated that the aim in the beginning was to protect the rights of future generations. And then came the 80s and 90s with the fall in the oil prices, which was followed by an economic stagnation. Then, with the renewal of the economic cycle, especially in the GCC countries, when there was an abundance of the oil revenues. So these funds were used in the periods of the boom, with the culmination and accumulation of wealth and assets were used to add to these funds, and at the times of deficits and stagnation, the funds were used to make up for the deficits, and afterwards they've been used as tools for economic diversification, transfer technology, and lately they've also been used in the field of political economics to gain the support of countries, or tools of influence, or exercising political and economic influence in these countries where investments take place. And China is particularly active in this, and their investments in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Also, the GCC countries of late, in the period of the boycott of Qatar, the funds have been used in this. I don't want to take too much of your time. I would like to present now the panelists. First of all, I would like to say that the first presenter, Dania Bafer, will not take part with us due to circumstances unseen. And we will also give 15 to 20 minutes to each panelist. This will be followed by a question and answer of half an hour from the panelists and the general public through the social media platforms. The first speaker will be Dr. Yousuf bin Hamad Al Balushi, who is an economic expert from the Oman, and he has a PhD in economics from King's College and London University. He taught economics there, and he has many papers, publications to his name, like he had Gulf region international comparisons, and also he has a book on the private sector as an engine of growth, sustainable development, and economic diversification in the Gulf region. Dr. Yousuf, please, the floor is yours now. Please go ahead. Assalamu alaikum, and may the blessings of God be upon. Can you hear me clearly? First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to allowing me the opportunity to take part in this important forum. We really were hoping to be here with you in person, but due to the pandemic, we have been denied this pleasure of meeting you in person. But what God wills is best. I will summarize the historical changes historical changes that Dr. Khalid has said. We in Oman, the fund used to be called the General Reserve. Now it's called the Investment Authority. Now we have more than 180 government-owned companies under the umbrella of this. I want to divide my presentation into three aspects. First of all, I want to speak about the general aspects of Gulf economies, including the Omani economy. In the second part, I will focus more on the sovereign wealth funds and their role. Everybody knows that the Gulf countries now are facing a crossroads and there are changes, and they all feel that they should diversify their economies and change into a digital economy, etc. The third part will be on how the sovereign wealth funds can play a role in attracting foreign investment and also in increasing the activity of the private sector. As for the Gulf economies, and the Omani one is no exception, we rely on the oil revenues. Maybe 85% of all our revenues rely on oil and gas. So therefore, the economic model we follow has played its role in building these countries. These countries are ready now to move into a new phase. Maybe 50 years ago or before the modern state was born, the opportunities were limited. Thankfully, after 50 years of economic growth based on a large role for the government, which relies on the oil revenues, and the government used to operate, used to invest. This may have been suitable for the previous period, but the new challenges now are different. They require different types of response, different than importing and exporting. Services and products, also about the foreign workforce and the internal national workforce, and also we should consolidate and increase and maximize the benefits that we have achieved. So, why should we make this change in the Gulf countries? First of all, these countries are facing an increase in the population, whether Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. There is a demographic window which merits the necessity of creating workforces. The government does that in the security forces for army, police, etc. But even these um, law enforcement and security forces have really expanded beyond normal limits and are costing a lot. And also, at the same time, you are denying the private sector from local talents and local workforce to engage in working for them when you employ them in the security sector. The other important point that the bigger the government is, this has led to the decision regarding economics and investment now has been branching out into different centers of decision making, and this has been now there is now a movement in the direction of mainstreaming that, and decisions relating to the economy are governed by simple factors. We need efficiency, we need good reputation and accountability, and the ability to follow up the implementation of decisions now is rather difficult. So, this makes it more incumbent to streamline and Oman and other Gulf countries have been investing for the last 50 years in the infrastructure. We have new road system, new airports, new ports. Now we are much more ready than before. So how can we maximize the benefits of these investments to achieve more? For example, if your airports only operate at 10% or the ports at 20% or the roads, I think the time has come for us to maximize our benefit, and this is another important justification for us to follow a different path. The most important aspect now is the pressures in the field of supply and demand in the oil market and the fluctuations as a result of, and also other aspects like renewable energy. So maybe the era of oil is on its way to wane and disappear. So I'm sure our countries are ready because we have large margins of maneuver to follow a different economic model. We hope that the sovereign wealth funds be part of this change in creating a developmental economic model based on local production and production for the purpose of industrialization and industrialization for the purpose of exporting. So the Gulf countries should take this into account in the future. This is so far as the general context and the justifications for change. As for the theme of our session, particularly pertaining to the sovereign wealth fund in Oman, thank God we all realize that there are major changes taking place in Oman from the day from the year 2020, although it's a year of sorrows and sadness because of the departure of the late Sultan Qaboos. But thankfully, the transfer of power was very smooth, and the new Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, uh, he was the person in charge of the national vision of Amman, which was set forth, and this will begin in January 21. So, if I give you some features of the national vision of Oman 2040, and I'm sure other Gulf countries have similar visions, although they have their own particular visions, the Oman 2040 vision is we want to Oman to reach advanced countries, and this can mean a lot. In order to do that, we have to have people who are creative, who enjoy certain skills, and they're of good health, and the economy also to be competitive and inventive and creative, and also the government apparatus should be capable of exercising governance and sound government and efficiency. This vision relies on four pillars. The first is the human factor and the economy, then the economy and development, then the environment and the institutionalization. They have 12 strategic directions, and they have within them 68 indicators uh, what can happen or what can be achieved until 2014. We are proud in Oman in the fact that it was written and formulated by Omanis and not international well-known international companies. So this is the directions were clear that we should really be engaged in a methodology which is based on participation and input. Of course, Oman is no exception. What I'm saying about Oman is because I'm talking about Oman, particularly about the maybe our public debt and the ability to export oil is less, but there are main commonalities. All Gulf countries are faced with the same formidable challenges, and everybody realizes that economic changes and achieving full sustainable development cannot happen through a prescription, a medical prescription. You buy it and apply it. It's all to do with economic investment, financial, economic policies, and with each with tools. And Dr. Khalid has said that these sovereign funds are an important economic tool to lead or direct the economic cycle. And economic cycles, we know, can mean years of boom and bust, as we have seen. So, therefore, these funds, so far as I'm concerned, are a very important and original tool that can enable us to achieve what we aspire to, whether an Iman of the 2040 vision or to move from a rentier economy and an economy relying on expat workers to more of a diversified economy, self-reliant economy. The sovereign wealth funds had the general policies which are rather clear that most their investments would be abroad. Maybe 30% will be inside, 70% outside. But this has been changing, and everybody is hoping that the focus will be internal. And everybody is inward looking now, and we really need to focus in maximizing benefits. Everybody realized that Oman is a large country and it's a country which is different than other Gulf countries when it comes to the abundance of natural resources. I don't want to brag too much, but Amman is heaven on earth, really. We have everything. We have a desert, we have mountains, we have in Salala beautiful scenery, and we have also economic tourism, we have normal tourism, and we have also medical tourism. And since forever, Oman was an export of metals like copper and others. And we have also a huge wealth in fisheries. We have a wonderful abundance of. Yes, we are part of the Gulf, but we also have shores on the Indian Ocean, and this is a very rich ocean in fisheries. And also, Oman has not fully utilized this resource yet. As for the industrial sector and what Dr. Khalid has said, that managing the economic cycle and also the trade activities, in my humble opinion, the sovereign wealth funds and investment authorities, due to their accumulated expertise and dealing with the outside world in deal making in Europe or America or Asia, they have the necessary expertise and the capabilities which help them open doors for foreign investment. Because the foreign investment speaks a different language. They speak of a language based on facts and figures. If you want to convince them of investing in Qatar or Oman, they need certain figures for the market, for the return, for the cost of operation. Also, this is the kind of expertise that the sovereign wealth funds have gained a lot of experience in through their international connections and their accumulated expertise, first of all, and secondly, due to their own know-how. And also, when the foreign investor knows that the counterpart in Oman is an arm of the government, and this means stability, and this means I don't particularly mean one particular Omani fund or other, but we really must admit also that the performance is still below what is desired, and we really need to double our efforts to create that kind of move. The margins here are, time-wise, are very limited, maybe 5, 10 years, but what is produced and uh, what should be manufactured inside the Gulf countries. If we, for example, if we make 100% of sales of oil or gas, but we spend 99% in importing things, this is not on. Maybe we can invite foreign investors, but the foreign investor can, if they can come through the sovereign funds because they have a very important role in building the economy and the private sector. I'm talking here about companies. The problem in Oman and other Gulf countries, the private sector is fragmented. Some are in the top 20 of the, they own the whole chain of the business. The rest are just small businesses. They're not proper entities, fully fledged entities. And so the funds can have a role in reorganizing the private sector because the private sector does not own or have the necessary know how and the ability to strike deals or strategic agreements with big companies. For this reason, the sovereign wealth funds can play a major role in this, in my opinion. I know there is a dilemma when it comes to the performance of sovereign wealth funds. Are they there just to supplement the national budget, or can they play a developmental role? In the future, the balance should be there, and the focus should be more on the developmental aspect because we are faced with a crossroads, as said, whether we like it or not, and the time has come. And these countries are ready, but they should move quickly enough. How many minutes have I got left?
بقي 4 دقائق من الوقت إذا
You have 4 minutes. Thank you. Excellent. God bless. What I want to say here really is the sovereign wealth funds in the Gulf countries have played a good role despite the discrepancies in their performances. Now they have another major pivotal role, and these funds have the capability, whether financial or technical, and the connections, the relations. We in Oman we always pride ourselves that Oman has a good standing amongst nations, and we have managed to attract direct foreign investment, and we have enough readiness that everybody is sure that Oman will go ahead able to implement its national vision under the leadership of the Sultan and achieve a lot. But despite that, there are formidable challenges and there are big roles the sovereign funds can play. We thank Dr. Yousuf for his invaluable intervention. The the next speaker is a joint paper between Dr. Hala Miniaoui and Dr. Nizar Jouini. Dr. Miniaoui will start. She is an associate professor at the University of Qatar. and she is a member of the Middle East Economic Institute. She obtained her PhD from Tunisia, and her focus was on economic policies and economic development. She has many publications to her name.
تفضلي.
Dr. Hela, the floor is yours.
السلام عليكم.
Assalamu alaikum.
شكرا على إتاحتكم الفرصة
Thank
لي
you for
للحديث
giving
عن
the opportunity to
نظام
present this
الجويني.
joint research with Dr.
مديرية
Nizar
الدكتور
Jouini
رشيد والسياسية
entitled
والإقليمية
Sovereign
والأحداث
Wealth
السياسية والأمنية
Funds
الخارجية
and Soft Power, the
الصحيح.
political economy
إذا
of
دعونا
small Gulf
نتساءل عن
countries.
تصور
So
الصناديق
we will be
الترويسية للخليج العربي.
discussing
هل هي
the
مجرد شيء
sovereign wealth
اقتصادي وهو
funds
يعكس
in small
دافع استقلال
Gulf
الدول
countries. Is it a
العربية
geo-economic
أم
uh,
هي أداة
engine,
عملية
or is
ومنعا
it a
لدول
tool for soft
وسياسي
power?
الأساس
So
تم
we mean
وضع
that the
الجنب
motivation
الخليجي.
is political mainly, or a mix
للإجابة على هذا النظام
of the two.
الثلاثي سنتطرق في هذا العرض إلى نماذج صناديق
In
الثروة
order to
السيادية
answer this
للغاز
question, we'll be talking
وكيف
about
تعمل صناديق
sovereign
الثروة
wealth
الإقليمية
funds in
للغاز
the Gulf
صناديق
and the
الثروة
relation
السيادية
between
للنفط
them and economic diversification
والغاز.
and their use as soft power,
ولكن
and then the
صناديق
conclusion.
الثروة السيادية
When it
الخليجية
comes
تقع
to
في
the
منطقة
examples of
استراتيجية معظمها باستثناء الكويت كما تعلمون
WFs
وهي
in the
تعمل
Gulf,
توسع
just
اقتصادها
like
في التسعينات
Dr. Khalid mentioned, it
وتأثير
was
الانفتاح
most of them
الاقتصادي على الجانب
were
الإقليمي
established
نظرا
after
إلى
the
مدى تأثير
70s, and
الدول
then
الغربية الإفريقية
of course,
والآسيوية
except for the
في
Kuwaiti
صناديق الثروة السيادية الخليجية
one,
بشكل
and
أساسي
it expanded
تعمل على
maybe
الرقابة
after the
الائتمانية
crisis in
وممارسة
2008
العمل
as a result
الجماعي
of the increasing
بشكل
opportunities and its influence increased
تصنيف
all
صناديق
over
الثروة
the world.
السيادية
And here you
الخليجية
can see the classification
في
of the
ثلاث مراحل أولية
sovereign
تضمن
wealth
ثلاث
funds.
مرحلة
We have an international classification, and we see that the
وبدأها
Emirates
الكويت
is the
ثم
first, and
السعودية
then Kuwait, and
ثم
then Saudi
البحرين ثم
Arabia,
الإمارات.
and then the fifth
أريد أن
is Qatar.
أشير أننا في
And I would like to say that in
الدول
this
الصغيرة
study, we focused on small
والتي
countries,
تقع
the Emirates,
تم
Kuwait,
تسمية
and
الدول
Qatar.
الصعيدية بالتحديد
Saudi
بأنها
Arabia
مدينة
was excluded because
العاصمة
it is a geographically large uh,
كما تم
country and in
بحث
terms of population as well. And Bahrain and Oman were also excluded
مرتبتها
because
المتعاقب على
they
دول
are
الخليج
lower
وهي
rank
تعتبر
internationally.
صناديق
And we
الخليجية
know that
المعارف
these
الدولية
Gulf
تعمل
funds for the Emirates, Kuwait,
نشطا
and Qatar are active, and
كبيرا
they have a
حسب
large size,
سياسة
as you can
المعارف.
see, as per this
نستند
international
إلى مناهج عمل
classification.
صناديق
Now,
الثروة السيادية
we will be talking about the methodologies of SWFs in the Gulf. There is a link between these funds and the national visions in this country, particularly through the economic pillars that were mentioned by Dr. Yousuf. So there is a link between economic diversification and the objectives of these funds through the national visions of these
بالنسبة
SWFs and the
لدور
Gulf.
صناديق الثروة السيادية
When it comes to the role of SWFs
هناك
in
بعض
terms of
الإنجازات
economic diversification, there were some accomplishments just mentioned by Dr. Yusuf, and
للأسف
also there are some objectives that unfortunately were not achieved. For instance, when it comes to the achievements, we know that these funds contributed to developing the infrastructure and also was factor of stability, of economic stability during the financial crisis and also the current coronavirus pandemic, and contributed to the green economy project and contributed to achieving food security. On the other hand, these funds did not achieve in creating competitive local industries and pushing forward entrepreneurship and did not contribute to linking the transformational industries, all industries with international supply chains. Here we focus on the green economy and the contribution of SWFs internally and externally. So far, we have highlighted the economic motivator in using these sovereign wealth funds in order to answer the first question. So it is indeed an economic driver. Now, what about the political aspect uh, for the use of the SWFs? How can we prove that? For example, the lack of transparency reflects political considerations. We can also say that these funds focus, of course, on local investments, but most of them invest abroad, and they were used in some political crises like the Gulf War and the blockade of Qatar. These factors can raise concerns as to whether these investments rely on economic and trade considerations, all political considerations, especially relating to foreign policy. So here we can take into account the geopolitical changes in the region in order to answer the second part of this study, the reducing reliance on energy coming from the Gulf in the United States and changing the U.S. strategy in the region after 2011, the rise of a multilateral regional system, and also the rise in national security concerns, and also the failure of achieving stability through military deals in the GCC, and the attacks on Saudi Arabia were mentioned in the past without retaliation by the US, the participation of GCC countries in wars, and the GCC favoring bilateral political alliances and new players, Turkey, Russia, and Europe, as new players in the region that need to be taken into account. So, Turkey and Russia in Europe are playing an increasing role, and thus the need to build partnerships by GCC countries. We're talking about Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, in order to face this political vacuum. In this table, we try to highlight the positives and the negatives. For example, when it comes to Europe, we have a big political weight, and the leadership of Europe through the JCPOA when it comes to the relationship with Iran. But we know that Europe has problems internally when it comes to its policies, and each European country has its different political considerations, and the economic approach controls the policy of the EU. Russia, when it comes to the advantages, is a major military strength. It wants to build economic partnerships and plays an important role at the geostrategic level or geopolitical level in Libya and Syria. But there are also concerns regarding the position of Russia vis-à-vis Iran and Syria. Turkey has good relations with some Arab or some Gulf countries, and we will see later how Turkey has good relations with some Gulf countries, while with others it has not so good relations. And Turkey wants to establish economic partnerships, and it has an ambition to lead the Islamic world. And this is what leads to confrontational relations with Saudi Arabia and other European nations like France, for instance. So, what about the soft power of SWFs in the Gulf? All new players in the region have aspirations to cooperate economically with the GCC countries, and also the successive economic crises give the SWFs a strategic role to save partners, just like the 2008 crisis, the Brexit, and the coronavirus pandemic. Also, the increasing concerns vis-à-vis security situation. And in order to prove the political motivators when it comes to SWFs. Through this graph, we can see that the Qatar, Kuwait, and Emirate investments in particular, and the Gulf uh, investments in particular, moved or shifted towards the geopolitical rising forces. We can see a decrease when it comes to the world, but an increase towards Europe, Turkey, and Russia, which reflects an alignment, a political alignment. And here we can see in more details, if we notice when it comes to Europe, there is an increase for Qatar, UAE, and Kuwait, but for Turkey, within these three countries, there is a decline in UAE investment in Turkey, whereas the Qatari investment in Turkey increased, and also the same applies to Kuwait. So in order to conclude, we can say that facing the security concerns, SWFs are used in order to strengthen economic and political links, and this is answering the question. So it's a mixture of both. There are economic objectives and there are also political objectives. The geopolitical changes provide the Gulf SWFs a large margin of maneuver in order to save the partners from potential crisis. So new partners have economic incentives in order to draw investments from the Gulf, and also based on the statistics, we can see that the Qatari, Kuwaiti, and UAE investments increase towards the new players, Turkey, Russia, and the EU, and declined when it comes to the world. So there is a link between political alignment and investment changes. Yes, these SWFs are at the same time soft power and at the same time a geo-economic driver. Thank you. I would like to thank Dr. Hela Miniaoui for this valuable intervention, and I would like to give the opportunity to Dr. Edwin Truman to intervene. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I found these two papers very interesting, and I'd be interested in, I have three questions. One general question is that my impression is that that many sovereign wealth funds have turned from a concentration on investing abroad to investing at home and promoting domestic development. I'm not criticizing that, but I would like to confirm that, and I'd be interested to know what forces have brought that about, right? One motivation for investing, limiting investment at home in the initial phase is that it could cause excessive inflation and absorption capacity concerns. And another consideration presumably is that as that the case for opportunities to invest at home increase and to promote development. This is actually a standard problem of almost all development in some sense. How fast do you push the domestic economy? That's a general question with respect to both papers. I'd also be interested in both cases. So now I'm going to be a little more pointed. The both the Omani and the Qatar sovereign wealth funds, on my assessment over time, have not been among the leaders in terms of their transparency and accountability. Now, in the Omani case, you have a new structure, and I'd be interested from Dr. Yousuf's perspective whether the new structure is likely to be more open, if you want to put it that way, in terms of its operations and transparency. And with respect to the Qatari fund, I'm just sort of interested why, is there any sense that within the Qatari community that its fund is less outstanding, if you want to put it that way, in the transparency area? I think that's true whether you look at my scoreboard or you try to evaluate the funds in terms of the Santiago principles. But I'd be interested in the comments on those three questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Edwin. نتيح الإجابة على هذا السؤال من الباحثين.
Thank you, Dr. Edwin. The floor is yours to answer these questions.
First of all, I'd like to thank. I mean, it's a really three deep questions, and from my side, and I mean, just to clarify that there is a lot of changing happening here in Oman when His Majesty Sultan Haytham take the lead now. One of these changes is that he merged all the state-owned enterprises under the Sovereign Fund, and they changed the name even from SWF to Oman Investment Authority. That's why, I mean, and also to clarify that we don't have the same deep pocket like our brothers from Qatar or in other GCC country. I mean, as our sister said, I mean, we are in the end of the list when it comes to the total value of our fund. But despite of all that, I mean, for the reason of observative capacity of Oman, the SGRF was focused 70 to 80% investment abroad, and that's for several reasons. Definitely, you know it better than I. One of them is strategic and to distribute the risk, and also to go for a more secure investment, because this is the generations fund. But I mean, the new mandate, honestly, for our fund is to try to develop the local economy when it comes to the private sector, seeding some more production capacity, try to organize some strategic partnership with some players. And as I tell you, Oman is a huge country. I hope you visit it. If not, you are most welcome to come, and we'll take care of you. Oman is blessed. We are having a lot of untapped resources. So it's not fair, and it's not wise to keep importing everything and keeping relying on unproductive economy. So the way forward is to really change the strategic model where we really focus internally. But it will take, a lot of time. It will take maybe 5 to 10 years to just gradually move from international focus to local focus. But the point I want to make is those fund has a lot of tools and skills and capacity to help toward that directions. The local company, the local normal investment authority locally, even some local company, they cannot do it. But because those fund has exposure outside. They've been playing in those fields, so they know how to play and how they can really be an attractive tools to channel the bridge between the international player and the local businesses. This is for the first point. When it comes to the governance and transparency, I totally agree with you, Amman, and the rest of the GCC. We are not scoring so good in that area. But the good news here when it comes to Oman, that one of our pillars in the Vision 2040, that we are having a governance there to manage the relation between the different stakeholders, to be more transparent, accountable. And I strongly believe that I think that's already a decision being made that all state company and our fund will be under having the rely on this the government practice. So they need really to be very clear, very transparent. And honestly, I mean, for Oman, we are having a tough time. And we need really to be focused and to be really joining hand with our friends and encourage them to come here and really help us to develop this untapped opportunity here in Oman. And let us, but I totally value your point. I think this is what I have.
طيب شكرا دكتور يوسف. بالنسبة لدكتور نزار الجويني أو
Thank you, Dr. Yousuf. Regarding the other question, Dr. Nizar, Jouini, do you have any comment? Or Dr. Hela?
الصوت يا دكتور.
You are muted, Doctor. Dr. Hela, will you be answering the question? Dr. Hela is muted as well. I have a comment regarding the SWFs directed from investments abroad to investments within the country. When it comes to economic diversification and all that, I think there are factors that led to this. I think first and foremost, let me say, there is a succession of crises in the Gulf that led to the funds playing an increasing role locally and domestically more than internationally. So this is one. The second reason is that there is an awareness at the level of the Gulf decision makers, and they are thinking about the future. What comes after oil, the post-oil era? And thus, decision makers are considering economic diversification. And economic diversification is not easy, of course. It needs domestic strategies to be adopted. There's also strategies at the level of different sectors. And I have a question addressed to Dr. Yousuf regarding this particular point. So there are objective reasons that made decision makers think about changing strategy from what was implemented in the past. And we mentioned this in our paper. The geopolitical changes in the region also gave SWFs a role, because the military coalitions and alliances and maybe some other alliances in the region could not bring stability. So Gulf countries considered giving SWFs a role in the region, and also at the level of local economies in order to bring stability, and also maybe political internal stability in these countries, and maybe future prospects. Thank you, Dr. Nizar. I have a question addressed to Dr. Yousuf or to Dr. Nizar or to Dr. Hela. So when rating the sovereign wealth funds, talking about the least transparent, as it is said, so we do not know what goes in and what goes out, and the management of these funds. Do you think that this is a major obstacle hampering the achievement of the objectives of these SWF? So when it comes to the contribution to manufacturing, the transfer of technology and diversification. Dr. Yousuf, you said Gulf countries are ready. I do not know what you meant when you talked about the readiness of the Gulf countries. So maybe you could explain in details. But the transition is actually, or the transformation from quasi-total reliance on oil to diversify the economy and creating job opportunities for the citizens and strengthening the exports. So the development of SWFs in the Gulf, is it satisfactory, or are there other obstacles to include transparency, oversight, and governance? Dr. Khalid, can I answer? Yes, 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 please. So I addressed my question to everyone. In reality, I think the problem is not at this level. The problem is in clarifying the strategy of economic diversification. I do not think, and I might disagree with Dr. Yousaf, I do not think that Gulf countries have a plan, a clear cut plan when it comes to economic diversification. And of course, should they have a clear plan, the question would be the funding. Maybe the funding will come from SWFs, but not because of lack of transparent governance at the level of these SWFs. We cannot diversify our economies. This is an incorrect statement. What hampers the economic diversification in reality is the lack of serious consideration, and it requires a market economy and reducing the level of state intervention or the size of state bureaucracy, and also working on policies that trigger market economy, and also change how we manage things within our economies, within our markets, and the relation between private and public sectors, and giving equal opportunities to all parties. All these things, in my opinion, are important to achieve economic diversification. And if you have good plans, if you have clear vision, the problem is not financing. Financing becomes secondary. This is my opinion. Thank you, Dr. Nizar, and I agree with you. So the biggest obstacle when it comes to economic diversification and the geo-economic reason, the rentier state, I agree with you. So it is not the direct obstacle. It is not the SWFs, but they are one of the tools for economic diversification. So they had to be used, and this was important. Dr. Hamid would like to intervene. Dr. Hamid, please, the floor is yours.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور خالد وشكرا جزيلا للدكتور نزار
I would like to thank you, Dr. Khalid, Dr. Nizar, Dr. Yousuf, and Dr. Hela. So I'd like to focus about the SWFs.
الدياجرام اللي وضحه الدكتوره هاله.
So, based on the paper presented by Dr. Hela, we can see that the sound is breaking. Dr. Hamid, please could you raise your voice because the interpreters need to hear you. When it comes to the sovereign funds and the role of the sovereign funds and their investments in the new emerging powers, and that was presented by the doctor. So it is clear that there's a focus on Turkey and Russia and other emerging players. So if we talk about the profits and the revenues, there's 5% revenues invested, and some other areas 10 to 15% invested with high risk. How can I allow the SWFs to invest in this particular sector or that? What is the mechanism that the funds rely on? The other question addressed to Dr. Yousuf. So, can we say that the funds are soft power, or is it a traditional power? So, the way the funds are managed determine the dynamics that influence the role of SWFs. Thank you.
دكتور حامد
Thank you, Dr. Hamid.
تعليق من الأخوة الاتحاد
Would you like to answer?
مداخلة جميلة من الدكتور
Thank you, Dr. Hamid, for this valuable intervention. Before starting to answer Dr. Hamid, I would like to clarify two things. You asked me about whether we are ready at the level of the Gulf and the readiness of the Gulf countries. Maybe we are exaggerating in our optimism. In Qatar, I think you are closer to this topic. The blockade imposed on Qatar gave you a great opportunity in order to strengthen your local industries. Are we ready? Are we not ready? This is not a choice. Readiness is acquired. The blockade actually pushed you in direction, not maybe self-sufficiency, but building and strengthening local industries. So when it comes to readiness, I am sure and confident that readiness should be made by Gulf countries moving forward toward post-oil era. The second point that was mentioned by Mr. Hamid and my colleagues regarding the governance. Uh, Governance is a key condition. It's all about management, governing SWFs, and this black box effect is mainly a key factor that leads to its weakness or the weakness of its managers. Maybe also the mixture of different roles, like Dr. Hela presented, the political role and the partnerships. So the calculated partnerships, maybe this needs to be taken into account as well. Most SWFs, in my opinion, this is not true, and these justifications are used in order to justify the failure to achieve a more profit and it is easier to manage in silence, and the winning is calculated, or the profit is calculated. So the investments are not a high risk. Most of them are guaranteed.
I don't say that there is a problem in the sovereign wealth funds or there are no diversification plans. We in Oman, we have the plans, we have the visions, we have the strategies. Qatar's the same. Everybody has all these. They are perfect. They are watertight as theorization, as plans, as documents. But the problem occurs when it comes to implementation, because setting forth these plans, the success proportion is not more than 10-20% maybe in setting these plans. The real test is in the 20 or 80%, sorry, of implementation. So therefore, all the defects relating to the management, the job market, the benefits from natural sources, etc., all of these should be taken into account. And also, who will be the players, the main players when it comes to development? It's the people inside the country. So therefore, if you take any of these factors alone in isolation, you will not achieve success, and you focus on only one, you will not achieve the success either. And if you ignore one, you will not achieve success. So therefore, you should have a comprehensive plan which takes into account all the variants, all the economy, sociology, and etc. I always say that thank God, God has granted us in this part of the world abundance of resources, and we also have a good infrastructure. We have good relations with the world. Now we've come to the time when we have to expand and we have to enhance our security and sovereignty by diversifying. By this is not a matter of luxury now. We're talking about our countries having to utilize all the tools at our disposal, including sovereign wealth funds and others. Thank you, Doctor. I have a general question. Any of the panelists can respond to if they so wish. And to what extent was the Arab Spring revolutions and the struggles and the conflicts and the attempts to influence and impact these events pertaining to the revolution? To what extent have all these factors impacted diversification efforts in our countries? This is one tier of the question. The second tier is there any impact on outside designs? Historically speaking, after every cycle of boom in the oil prices, we noticed that one way or another, either wars were caused or something to deplete what we accumulated of wealth. This happened in the Iran-Iraq war, then in the Gulf War, then after the last boom, the Trump deal of the century, which he got half $1 trillion from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Is there any sense now that our country is accumulating all this wealth? Because once you reach the peak, either through internal strife or outside conflicts, all the wealth that has been accumulated is depleted again through this kind of conflicts, like, for example, a conflict in the Gulf or or the impact of the Arab Spring or Arab revolutions, or outside interference, like what happened with the United States and Trump in particular. Please, if you allow me, this is a rather provocative question, somewhat. What happened is Gulf countries have accumulated this wealth, and then if conflicts are started or caused, this means that the people who manage these funds are weak in their abilities because إذا كان if your ability is big enough, you're flexible enough, you can absorb a lot of trouble and deal with it. But if the contrary is the case, then the space in which you move, Dr. Khalid, I always say the Gulf countries could have been the bank of the world, really, if they were run by countries or persons who are up to the responsibility required from them, if they built these countries through building the economies in the right way through education, if they built strategic partners with countries with clean hands, I think neither the United States or others can influence it. But the defect and the fault lies in us always. If you give me some figures like 12 million barrels a day in Saudi or you others, if you put all this together, where does all the money go to? You in Qatar, us in Oman and Saudi Arabia. We should not make up these flimsy excuses that these people are dragging us into conflicts or whatever. We must deal with things in a matter which is in a manner which is mature. And this is my personal opinion, by the way. I know I know that this forum is open to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid's question is related to Dr. Hamid's question, and which is asking what are the factors governing this investment so far as the Gulf funds, and also it goes beyond that into diversification and achieving economic prosperity. There are two sides to this. There is the political side and the economic side. Dr. Khalid is proposing that to what extent can the political aspect impact, and this is at the heart of our paper, joint paper with Dr. Hala. We say that the soft power by the sovereign fund, but we do not have any material evidence that this soft power is actually utilized. And we also have proven that the new geopolitical changes and the new actors has made these funds move in this direction. So therefore, there is strong correlation between the political situation when the Americans have departed from the area and started relying on their allies. This is something which has created a political vacuum and made the political aspect have an impact on the investment. As for the Arab Spring, if we take a look at, for example, in the graph which Dr. Hall included in her presentation, we will see how investments after 2011 have changed. They have changed in the world. The Gulf countries' investments in the world have changed and also have changed towards the political actors in the region. If this indicates anything, then it can indicate that the Arab Spring had a causal effect into these changes. So my question is, were these changes really the reason behind delaying the economic diversification. Maybe in this forum, other factors have been mentioned, but I will say the question of economic diversification is linked to the demographic changes in the Gulf countries. There is now really a demographic, sorry, weight which needs a very serious look at its future and the future in general. Secondly, let's look at the economics in the Gulf countries. Maybe now they are they are not fully integrated and complete economic systems. So maybe it's rather simplistic that each country can build its economic and industrial strategy on its own. The Gulf countries should think collectively to have a joint strategy. Now, the world is reliant on blocks, geopolitical blocks like Africa, like in Europe. The Gulf countries should start thinking seriously in the economic integration between them. And now we can speak about, then we can speak about a future diversification plan. Yes, the political aspect is there. Also, there are political factors. There is Iran, and there are those who look at the situation in a dynamic way. Some wants to preserve the status quo. Yes, politics has a role, but the political interference in the economic side or economic diversification, this is much deeper than political aspects or political involvement. We must look at this from a point of view of complementing or integrating the Gulf area. We have almost come to the end of the time, but we have other questions through the social media. I will pose them together as a group. I'll give you each 2, 3 minutes. A question to Dr. Yousuf. You presented some solutions about the Gulf countries with a focus on Oman. Yesterday, we had some challenges about the challenges faced by the sovereign funds, and that is to do with governance. Also, how can these funds play a developmental role with these challenges being there? Also, what are the bases upon which the decision makers in Oman are relying to build these policies, and can a Gulf sovereign fund utilize the oil revenues better? A question to Dr. Nizar and Dr. Hala. A question to Dr. Hala. Have you have you made any comparisons with other smaller countries or larger countries compared to the Gulf countries? If not, do you think the larger countries differ from the small countries? And if so, why? Another question to Dr. Hala. According to what Dr. Yusuf has said, that we find that the Oman Sovereign Fund, and according to the 2040 vision, that they should look inwards instead of looking outwards. Do you think this will impact the argument you have made? And also, there are questions over the Q&A. A question, special greetings to the Tunisian lady. A question to Dr. Nizar Jouini. Are Gulf sovereign wealth funds able in the future to replace oil revenues? Another question. I have a question directed to the lady presenter. we find that her paper relies on the analysis more than the technical aspects of managing the sovereign wealth funds. I have some technical, financial, and economic questions, and that is how can we have an indicator on the liquidity, on the risks faced by these funds, so that we can judge the real technical performance, Dr. Aqil Jabr. I think this is a very, this is an independent team altogether. Now I open the floor to you to choose the questions. There are سؤال باللغة الإنجليزية.
their heavy reliance on expatriate workers, is there a strategic plan for this fund to tackle this problem? سؤال آخر يقول to talk about governance and transparency in running the GCC sovereign wealth fund. Don't you think that this is a time to open discussion on change the whole legislative organizational structure and then approach new legislative that would help achieving certain standard of governance and transparency in running the sovereign wealth fund. أعطي المجال للدكتور يوسف للتعليق.
I give the floor first to Dr. Yousuf to have not more than 3 minutes, please, to comment.
النقاط اللي تم إثارتها
The points raised are very important indeed, especially the one pertaining to governance. Governance, as they say,
الشيء المهم المفقود
is the most important thing which is at the heart of the total factor and activity, or
في الحوكمة
it is the pretext used. The principles of governance are known as transparency, accountability, also the process of decision making. Undoubtedly, all Gulf countries suffer from this, and there is no doubt that there are efforts being exerted every now and then to deal with the question of governance. But we're talking about people for the last 50 years have the same experiences, the same mentality. Now you want them to create a paradigm shift, a huge leap, and which is reliant on the other, completely relying on advisory companies, or you want them to be more transparent, etc. This will no doubt take some time, but so far as Gulf countries, this is clear and this is incumbent upon them, and this is a demand of the street because thankfully the level of awareness in the Gulf countries people has risen, and now they, especially in Gulf countries, the population is speaking about a different level of awareness. I mean, the countries are talking about value-added tax reforms, etc. So there will not be easy now to have all these things without pertaining to the questions raised about governance. Can the sovereign funds compensate for the oil revenues and replace them? Of course not. But it can act as a maestro and this arm of change and managing this wealth. What we lack always in the economic change in the Gulf is the lack of the maestro or the strong player who has the ability and the financial strength and the ability to lead this train of change. We in Oman, we have made changes in the structure, and all government-owned companies, they have different capabilities financially and technically, and we hope that we will focus now on the developmental side more than the financial side. because through development we can achieve the financial prosperity. I'm very happy to have taken part in this forum and benefited a lot from the ideas exchanged here.
شكرا دكتور يوسف. هذا من
Thank you, Dr. Yousuf, and we have benefited from your input. Dr. Nizar, if you have anything. Thank you, Dr. Khalid. There was a question pertaining on the comparisons between large and small countries. We chose small countries as a result of testing this argument because small countries, because they fear political vacuums more than larger countries. For this reason, they have a better opportunity to use the sovereign wealth funds as an extra factor in addition to other factors to achieve stability. And of course, this was the aim of our paper that these countries should use these funds for such aims and purposes. As for the question about can the sovereign fund replace oil revenues? Definitely not. What we aim for really is economic diversification, and this is not linked to financing. Economic diversification has other rules and objectives. An investor, when he or she chooses a Gulf country, is not because there are sovereign funds, but there are factors which enable this investment to be profitable and to have innovation in them. So definitely the aim is not to replace oil revenues with the sovereign fund. There was an important mention, and that is transactions that the workforce, which is the expat workforce, which works in the Gulf countries, is there a strategy for that? This is directly linked to economic diversification. Maybe the time has come for the Gulf countries to look at maybe the foreign workforce as a wealth that can be invested in. This is not difficult. There are different experiments in European countries and in Canada to look into the future with an eye on economic diversification makes it incumbent upon these countries to look at the workforce as an input into production and the tool of production, and they should take it into account if they wanted economic diversification. Dr. Hal, if you have any comments,
نعم
please.
شكرا
Yes,
نظام
thank you. I just
أكثر
want
أسئلة
to
مهمة
add
جدا
the
ويعني
questions
تثير
are very
اهتمام الحقيقة
important and they raise another argument altogether, another discussion,
حقيقة
and can lead to other papers. But I just want to
في هذه
comment
الجلسات
and agree with
الفائدة
Dr. Nizar
عدة النقط
about
التي يساهم
these
في تغيير
sovereign funds
في تغيير
replacing oil
في
revenues.
حالة العودة
Definitely not if
النفط
they
خلينا
if
نقول
they
بعودة
manage
مستثمرة
to
ستواجه الدول
I
النامية
think
في
if
تصنيف الدول الريعية يعني
even
حينما
if
تتغير الريع
the
وانتهاء من النفط سيتم
the rent comes from oil and becomes the source becomes from profits of investment, this will still make them rentier economies. As Dr. Khalid has said, Dr. Nizar, yes, it's a very complex and deep issue and can take a lot of time. It cannot be happening overnight, but we must think strategically. We must have a clear vision, especially when we're talking about partnership and partnering and how to bring the private sector into play and how can governments
ساعدني دكتور نزار أن تستقطب
help me, Dr. Nizar. How can
تجلب
they
الأطراف
attract the private
والقيام بهذه
sector
العملية المعقدة والتي لا
to
تتم
achieve this
بفردها أو
complex
يعني بمفردها
procedure that the government cannot do on its own. There should be integration and complementing each other. And we should not look at the Gulf countries as if they will achieve economic diversification individually on their own. Only through integration they can speed up this process, the process of economic diversification. So we must separate between the role of the sovereign funds as a geo-economic driving force through the large revenues and between becoming these funds becoming a replacement for the oil revenues. We must separate the two issues, the two options. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hala, and I want to close by something I said before and I repeat now that the decision of economic diversification is a political decision par excellence, is not just an economic decision. And I don't think there is no conflict between a government or state with a rentier economy and when it comes to economic diversification, we must take that into account. I want to close by thanking the panelists for their valuable interventions, and I would like to thank all those who followed us through the social media platforms. And we apologize for not having uh, more time to respond to your all questions. I remind you of tomorrow's the last day. I remind everyone to register and thank you all and may God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you all.